KnowGravity is a consulting company, and every consulting company needs to have at least one 2x2 matrix. So I will try to very briefly show you our view, how based on the 2x2 matrix, those principles that you heard about this morning of the Business Agility Manifesto may be transferred into reality. So over the past 12 years or so, we developed a thing that we call modern enterprise engineering. Very briefly, an important word even in this name is model. A model is, to us, a description of something important, and we have heard a lot of things, of assets of an enterprise that are important. So, when we start with this view, we start with a strategy model. You need to know why your enterprise exists. So you have to think about the goals, the strategies, how to achieve them, how, what the capabilities are that are needed, and as Ron explained, the terminology that is important to the business of your enterprise. Sooner or later, or in parallel, you run the business. So there is an operational model, as we call it, where you see Rogers elements like processes, which follow or followed by organization structures, not vice versa. You may have value chains here that will be implemented by processes and finally executed by organizational structures. And you have here rules, as explained by Ron, that guide the enterprise and the employees of the enterprise through the operation of the business of your enterprise. Yes, all of us will have IT means to support, to run the business, so you need to think about functionalities, requirements, specifications, verification means whatever, whether your technology really supports your business. And finally, you will have some really technical details, your IT implementation, your IT architecture, your zoo of IT systems that finally runs the business. So that means we have, in one dimension, two clear elements or two different views. The upper half is the view of the business. You talk in business language, you think in business terms, whereas in the lower part you talk about technology, supporting the business, helping to run the business more efficiently. And you may also separate these four quadrants into a left part, where you specify what you want, or describe what you want, and a right part, where you describe how you implement the business or the technology level. And these are our four quadrants. But our four quadrants have 5 areas. So fifth area is the change area. This is where the dynamics come into place, the agility comes into place. All those elements of the upper 4 quadrants are managed, or should be managed, in an agile, flexible way. So here we have things like projects, like variability of your enterprise. So this is some kind of an orthogonal element or aspect, how to change your business, described by the upper 4 quadrants. And to us, because requirements engineering is a very important element, requirements engineering is somewhere in between these two worlds, the business and technology. And finally, as I think all of you have explained, it is not about manufacturing, it's about engineering a system called enterprise. So the following slides are explaining all these 5 quadrants a little bit more in detail, but I will very quickly go through them to postpone the lunch not too much. So the what, and on the business level, the strategy model has things to be inventorized, documented, described, managed, whatever, as you can see them. And I put some of the words in red, and I think almost all of those terms you have heard this morning from the three business agility guys. If we move to the right, how a business is operated, you see things like value chains that should be considered. You see things like rules that should be followed. Or you see things like processes, and you see organization structural elements. Very briefly, on the third quadrant, maybe the most notable thing here is there's nothing in red. That means this is already quite technical, and you three talked about the business. This is also important, but it's coming after the business. So yes, we have things like requirements, we have maybe even use cases, or user stories, scenarios, whatever. All these nasty technical things that are much less important than the others. And even here, on a more technology level, a more detailed level, we have nothing in red, except maybe for the background, just nothing to do. This something, these are elements that need to be inventorized in an architecture, in a Zachman framework maybe, and that are here to support the business. And the fifth quadrant is really the dynamic part, the change part, and here are things like you need to be aware of variation points in your business. Where do you have variation points in the processes? Where do you have variation points in your products? Where do you have variation points in your organization structure? And then you need to decide, as we have heard this morning, to decide, set the decisions to change some parts of your enterprise because some things in its environment or in itself have changed and you have to react. So, if you see the whole picture, these are not just 5 independent countries. They are interconnected. So you have interconnections between strategies, for example, and rules that come out of strategies and tactics. You have business capabilities that may be implemented in processes, and so on and so on. And from the very bottom of the 5th quadrant, you have the dynamics, the change initiative that allows you to control changes on your assets, on your knowledge assets, through your entire enterprise. We are a member of the object management group, and here's just a zoo of 3 letter or 4-letter abbreviations. Some of them you may have seen before. We rely entirely on OMG specifications to represent those elements that are worth to be inventorized. I don't go into the detail of all these abbreviations, just to give you an idea. This is entirely based on public OMG specifications. Now, I think this is almost the last slide, so lunch is not that far anymore. Whom of you is aware of GDPR? This nasty thing about data protection that comes into place in May this year. I just want to show you, based on this strange, dangerous thing coming from Europe, basically, as a new influencer. So there's a new regulation coming from the EU, affecting many, if not most, enterprises in Europe, as well as, at least partially, in Switzerland. So you have to recognize there is a new influencer called GDPR, data protection laws. This needs to be analyzed. For example, you have, as a resource, you have a lot of personal data. You have information about your customers, about employees, about many people that are subject to this regulation. So you have to decide how to cope with this new regulation with respect to your resources. So that means you have to rethink your strategies, you have to invent some tactics how to comply with those regulations. This goes further. It may cause that you need new capabilities that you haven't had before. It may lead to new rules, new behavior rules, how your employees behave in order to comply with the new regulation. It may cause changes in your existing processes. It may even cause new processes that are needed to fulfill those regulations. Those processes and those tasks within those processes should be performed by somebody, somewhere. So, as you can see, seem to be consistent after the processes, the organization follows, and vice versa. You have to think about responsibilities, who is responsible for those parts that have changed. You need to assign those responsibilities to people, and you may even need new skills that were not available before, just to fulfill the new regulations. And yes, sooner or later, finally, you need to have some support or some association to your technology, to your IT landscape. You may have some databases or domain or business objects that store critical information about people that need to be adapted, changes, protected, maybe. This may lead to reallocation of some of those information to more protected environments, to more protected systems, for example, to more protected databases, and all this technical stuff that follows from this business change. You need to check whether you have done your changes correctly, so you maybe think about testing the changes, and finally, you need to manage the whole change that makes your enterprise compliant to this new regulation. So this is how one change from outside, from Europe, may affect almost the whole enterprise on many, at least many aspects and assets of your enterprise. And this is why architecture is so important. You need to know what you have in order to be able to change it. So that means finally, what this is nothing more than the enterprise's brain or the enterprise's memory. And I think that was it, very quickly.